How much control does the establishment have over the so-called alt-right movement or the new right movement? Now, of course, I'm aware that these are very loose terms, and many different groups exist out there and subgroups, and they identify themselves in different ways. And of course, there's splinter groups all over the place, and there is no one manifesto that determines the alt-right or the new right. But of course, we see certain trends, and we see certain aspects of it. We see kind of this sympathy for Russia. We see these sympathies or these hopes placed in Donald Trump and the Trump administration. We see kind of this cultural battle against the left, and some very reactionary ideas are pitched against these socialist communist ideas, and things get very extreme. You see a resurgence of racism, and you see a resurgence of identity politics, and who are we, and what is kind of the identity, the common identity of white people, and what's our future, and what are the threats, and so on. So, of course, the establishment, the true superpower in the West, the empire that came out of the British colonial empire, of course the empire wants to control the entire political spectrum, and they also want to control the conspiracy literature, and they want to control everything. They want to control the left. That much is clear. That much is clear. And I've published I published a video on this channel of how British intelligence actually started the conspiracy movement, or the modern conspiracy media, right? Using facts and fictions and diversions and all that. So now, of course, the next question will be, does the establishment run or steer the alt-right movement or the new right movement? Or at least, what's their influence over it? You know, the people they control, maybe, or the ideas they control. And that's an important question. And of course, if you want to try to answer this question, if you try to assess how much influence the elite has, you have to do that professionally. You have to keep collecting information, and you have to have an open mind about this. It's not about blaming everybody. It's not about creating chaos. It's not about creating paranoia. But it's about, you know, getting people to educate themselves about intelligence matters and about the empires, and then trying to weed out the spies and the misdirection. Now, one thing we need to consider here is the so-called Council for National Policy, or CNP. This is a shadowy organization, kind of a conservative counterpart to the left-wing or Social Democratic Council on Foreign Relations. And so from the shadows, the CNP seems to steer many flavors of the political right in the United States and Europe, and has done so for decades. And the spectrum ranges from mainline Republican groups to shock jocks like David Duke, and even the early conspiracy media of the John Birch Society. Now, not every CNP member is automatically and consciously part of a conspiracy. It can be assumed that many bona fide members are simply watched and indirectly steered. And so the membership lists of the CNP are secret, and members are requested never to mention the organization by name. A list of members from 2014 has fortunately been leaked. Among the members are Oliver North, who was involved with the CIA in the Iran-Contra scandal, was involved in some other things, and I think, you know, he has a big job in the media as well. Then we have Jack Abramoff, political lobbyist. Then we had the majority leader of the Republicans in the U.S. Congress, Richard Armey. And we had the TV preacher, Pat Robertson, the arms rights activist, Larry Pratt, Steve Bannon from Breitbart, who had a post in the White House for a while. And Steve Bannon now wants to save Europe with his right-wing movement, right? You have Kelly and Conway. You have the parents of Blackwater founder Eric Prince, and Prince himself is probably a member as well. Young Eric Prince completed an internship in 1990 at the White House under President George H.W. Bush, former CIA director, member of Skull and Bones. And Prince and his relatives, they own billions in various business fields, and his youngest son, Charles Donovan, was named after William Donovan, the former director of the Secret Service OSS, forerunner of the CIA. And of course, Blackwater, they got all these contracts and commissions and all that. And so, yeah, this is something you have to look into. Now, of course, please do that in a professional way. Not everybody in the CNP is an evil person who is knowingly taking part in the conspiracy, but of course you have to recognize a certain pattern here. Certain networks are established, and certain people kind of from this establishment, CIA, they have some middlemen, some millionaires, and they give money to foundations and launder that money, and that money trickles into the right-wing political sphere, and then you have certain people who use that money. And that's just something that you have to be aware of. That is something that you have to be aware of if you're on the left, right? If establishment people give money to the left, you know, there are always many strings attached, and this is not going to serve your interest. This is not going to end well. They're just going to turn you into a radical, or they're going to turn you into a social justice warrior with no proper job and then no proper life. And these right-wing networks, they could turn you into a right-wing social justice warrior with no life, no job, and no nothing, or they can turn you into a radical who's an outcast in society, or they can just make you fan the flames, and so that people fight each other in the general population. So this is something we need to investigate more. This Council for National Policy and the kind of larger networks, right? So it's not just the deep state is not simply left. Deep state is neither left nor right. The deep state controls the left and the right, and people used to know that, especially in alternative media. So years ago, when you said deep state, you normally meant the CIA and rich families and owners of large corporations, the military-industrial complex. This was regarded to be, you know, right-wing, even though that term is very broad and very misleading. So, yeah. So we have this. So we have the CNP, and a lot of alternative media nowadays is kind of in the CNP flavor. They will push Donald Trump. They will push. They will ignore the bad agenda of the Trump administration. You know, the creepy people in the administration, the establishment folks. I mean, for Pete's segment, Trump just nominated a guy to the Supreme Court who was a trusted fellow traveler of George W. Bush, and who comes from the Yale University, who's a likely member of Skull and Bones. It's horrible, but a lot of these media out there, they will still carry the flag of Trump and hope he's gonna arrest the left-wing deep state and that sort of thing. So then you have Richard Spencer, one of the gurus of the alt-right movement. Richard Spencer, he calls for peaceful ethnic cleansing to preserve the white race. And of course you're supposed to have an identity. Of course you're allowed to have an identity if you're white. Of course you can refuse these weird agendas and weird experiments of bringing in untold numbers of foreigners, and of course you're supposed to have a sense of threat. You know, what are the threats for white people? Just like Latinos have a sense of threat of what's dangerous for Latinos, or black people have a sense of what's dangerous to black people. But you also have to realize you're all members of the same subjects of the same empire. You need to find ways to work together. And if you preach ethnic cleansing in the United States and you kind of promote these ideas that you can somehow get rid of Latinos and blacks and Asians or whatnot, people who are citizens who have been there for generations, this is just nonsense. This is just silly. This is not going to help the conservatives' cause. This is not going to help America. And this makes more sense, the sort of chaos and the sort of agitation that makes more sense for the establishment. So, it makes me somewhat suspicious. And so, Spencer has a man from a family of influential CIA patrons behind him. William Regnery II comes from ultra-right circles full of neocons and intelligence men, and is happy to finance select right-wing figures. And with Spencer as his frontman, he built up a think tank and also gave money to other right-wing organizations. And so this is very worrisome. And of course, it's not proof that Richard Spencer is a CIA agent or whatever, or that he's a CIA shill. But you know, it's a question of trust, and of course, it's difficult to trust if you have these kind of people in the background. And when Richard Spencer and his colleagues in Hungary wanted to hold a conference with the crazed occultist Alexander Dugin, a radical leader of the new right from Russia, they were thrown out of the country because the Hungarian secret services suspected the American Richard Spencer of working for the CIA. Of course, they didn't say he was definitely a CIA agent, but they said that the risk is too high that he could be one, and we just don't trust that guy. And Regnery's grandfather was a member of the America First Committee, founded by Yale student R. Douglas Stewart of Quaker Oats' infamous family of entrepreneurs who gave radioactively contaminated food to mentally handicapped children for research purposes. And other members of the America First Committee were the future U.S. President Gerald Ford, Sergeant Shriver, later Chief Justice Porter Stewart, CIA Counterintelligence Chief James Jesus Angleton, CIA man John Singlop, Alexander Haig, Edward Teller, John S. Foster Jr., Samuel T. Cohen, and other figures of that caliber. A sister organization is the Center for Security Policy, where neocons like James Woolsey, Dick Cheney, Richard Perley, James Schlesinger, and Paul Wolfowitz romp around. So these circles like this, they've always tried to influence politics and media, especially alternative politics and media. You saw some weird stuff with conspiracy authors. You saw some weird stuff surrounding the John Birch Society. Now, of course, there was some good stuff coming from the John Birch Society, and there were really good people in the John Birch Society. But you have to look around for problems. You have to be professional about it. And yeah. Now, Breitbart's, or formerly Breitbart's, Steve Bannon, he's also CNP, and after his stint in the White House, he wants to build a conservative movement in Europe to counter George Soros, who plays the patron of the left. Now, if I don't trust Breitbart, and of course I don't trust George Soros, but they're supposed to be pitted against each other, and they're supposed to be these leaders of these movements, it kind of, personally, it sounds to me as if the right-wing CIA is staging a fight with the left-wing CIA. That's kind of that's kind of the ring it has for me, and yeah, and then you had Alex Jones from InfoWars. He repeatedly boasted that close relatives of his maintained significant contacts with the CIA and special forces. So part of this is bragging. But not all of this seems to be bragging. As a dentist, his father supposedly gave special teeth implants to CIA agents. Alex's cousin, Buckley Hammond, who helped to launch the radio show in '93 and who stayed with the company for years, is the son of William Hammond, a Vietnam veteran who settled in Guatemala and has, according to Alex, assumed a leading position in the armed forces, comparable to the infamous Oliver North. Now, of course, the American circles in Guatemala were extremely anti-communist right-wingers who did not shy away from anything, and there are links to conservative circles in the US that dealt with conspiracy theories. So far, no one has closely examined whether William Hammond was actually significant on a larger scale. And of course, we can't draw a conclusion from this that Alex Jones works for the CIA. You know, it's something that gets thrown around a lot. You know, things like that. Alex Jones works for the CIA, or he works for the Vatican, or he works for the Lizards, or he works for the whatever CIA Zionists or whatever. Things like that get thrown around easily. But if you examine someone professionally, if you're being professional about it, it's very difficult to nail somebody. It's very difficult. You're dealing with a lot of information. You're dealing with a lot of stuff. It's hard work, and usually you just have different scenarios with different probabilities. Now, counterintelligence is a delicate business. You can neither blindly trust those who seem to have a ready-made right-wing revolution prepared, nor can you succumb to paranoia. And if you're not trained in this, if you're not really trained in this, of course it gets difficult. When is an argument valid? When is it not valid? When should you call somebody out? When should you not call somebody out? When is it important to level a certain suspicion and to follow up on a certain suspicion? And when is it something you shouldn't? When shouldn't you call somebody out and level suspicions at someone? You know, what's the material you have? What's the research you have? And so, yeah, of course, over the last couple of years, you saw Alex Jones changing significantly. You know, loves Russia, the Russian regime, even though it destroyed every bit of freedom, and there's no freedom over there. And Alex Jones became a super supporter of Trump, even though initially he didn't like Trump at all, and even feared Trump was just supposed to split the conservative vote to make Hillary win. And then suddenly the switch came, and InfoWars became kind of turned into this infomercial for the Trump administration, and they created this myth that Trump was going to save the country, even though no real evidence was ever presented. As a matter of fact, the algorithms simply told the Trump campaign what people out there wanted to hear. And so Alex Jones mobilized a certain number of voters. I don't think we have any data on that, how many Alex Jones listeners or supporters actually went out to vote for Trump. And yeah, we see Alex Jones flip on the internment camp issue, the FEMA camp issue. He now thinks it's a good thing to fight the left, and Trump is going to save America with it. When the supposed civil war against the left happens or whatever, Alex Jones now plays this left versus right game, and there's many worrying things there. Nothing proves conclusively that Alex Jones works at the CIA or that Jones works for the Russians, but at least to me, it's worrying enough to so that I don't support him any longer, and that I voice my thoughts on the topic, and that I'm trying to be professional about it. We also see kind of we also see things in this so-called new right or alt-right. We also see things that are reminiscent of what the left did during the Cold War. So loving Russia, promoting Russia as this big role model, that's something you saw from the left during the Cold War. Then this ideological brotherhood with Russia, it's what the alt-right, new right is doing today. This is what the left did back in the old days. Then playing this left versus right game, you know, antagonizing this, you know, the left versus the right. This is something that the left did in the Cold War. Then supporting a shady president who's really working for the establishment, but shamelessly promoting that president even though they should know better. Now, this is also something that the left had done during the Cold War. Remember the left-wing presidents? The left-wing presidents of the United States? They had supporters. They had lots of supporters who ignored all the bad aspects. So what the new right or the alt-right is doing is not really revolutionary. It's not doesn't really seem designed or capable of breaking the power of the establishment, of changing the dynamic of the three superpowers in the world. It's not changing the dominance of the three superpowers in the world. As long as you stay in that east versus west paradigm or the left versus right paradigm, as long as you stay in there, you're going to lose. Now, the left wing during the Cold War, they marched on the streets. They tried a cultural revolution. They were thinking about violent revolution, and all these things happened. And they were protesting this and they were protesting that. But did anything come out of it? No. The superpowers remain superpowers, and Western establishment control the left and the right. And so if we look at this from various perspectives, it becomes more and more problematic. Then you have kind of this entanglement, this intelligence entanglement with the Russians. The more alt-right people, alt-right leaders or new right leaders, the more often they meet with the Russians, the more they get into bed with the Russians, the worse it gets. So Richard Spencer, I think, what was it, his wife or something? I think she's a Dugin fan. She translates this drivel from that weird occultist. And so this is something that destroys credibility. Russia is a terrible regime. It's just a rearranged communist regime minus the ideology. Remember, this is something that the CIA would want. The CIA or the Western establishment, they want unhappy people in the West to fall into the Russian trap, right? So everybody in the West, every real patriot in the West who is fed up, who wants change, if these patriots, if they fall from the Russian trap, if they get entangled with the Russians, that weakens those patriots, costs credibility, and you also get into weird legal territory, right? So if you have certain meetings with Russians, if you take their money through intermediaries, if you voice certain things in private, that can be construed as treason or espionage, and that can be used against you, and then you get turned, the CIA will threaten you, will throw you in prison, or you better work with us. And that's a huge problem. That is a huge, huge problem. That is a huge problem. So, in terms of an empire, the United States Empire, or the Anglo-American Empire, they might desire a conservative phase for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe we'll have another 4 years of Trump, and maybe a new war begins, and then everybody wants conservatism, or what they're being given as conservatism. And then you get new militarism, and you get all these things, and maybe that's what the establishment wants. Maybe that's where this is going. And right from the start, Trump said he wants to be the new Reagan, and I said he probably will be the new Reagan. He'll bring back some jobs, he'll be liked and respected for that, but the debt is going to grow, and there's going to be lots of problems with the East, and there's going to be lots of other problems, and it's going to be a continuation of the empire, just as we saw with Reagan. So yeah, it's just these problems I see with the alt-right or the new right. And remember, this is coming from a guy. I've been married for a long time. I have 2 kids. I'm very patriotic. I have some serious conservative ideas, but I'm not jumping on a ready-made train that I know not enough about, or that I think is weird. I don't just jump on this train, this ready-made revolution. Hey, you don't have to think, just join, just repeat whatever they're saying. You know, just just repeat this old school British colonial style racism. So, you know, selectively quoting science and saying, well, African Americans have a lower ID on average, or sub-Saharan Africans have lower IQs on average, without actually quoting the full picture that, well, starving babies in Africa are not expected to have great IQs, even though the genetics are good. And African Americans, they've been rising in intelligence, and the establishment tried to put the brakes on by poisoning, especially African Americans, with lead in the drinking water and all this stuff. And so, yeah, you have to look at the whole picture, right? You have to look at the whole picture, and this is something we need to research more and be very, very mindful of. Very mindful of intelligence work and these intelligence tactics. So again, don't think that everybody in the CNP is an evil conspiratorial devil, and don't think that every CIA guy is evil, or don't think that you can win without making sacrifices, or you can win without making some serious compromises. I'm not preaching some unrealistic, perfect standard. It's just I'm preaching basic standards of intelligence work and political science and history and all that. So, what do you think about the alt-right movement? What do you think about the CNP and Alex Jones's family connections, and how he never wanted to talk about the CNP? You know, maybe Alex just doesn't get it, right? It's just he doesn't read books anyway. He barely has read any book in the last 10 years. So how would he know? He heard about the CNP, and some of his buddies are in the CNP. I think Larry Pratt is in the CNP or whatever, and yeah, Larry Pratt is in the CNP, and Larry Pratt probably told Alex Jones, well, it's just a conservative circle. I'm a member, and doesn't mean much. I'm not part of a conspiracy. So Alex goes on the air and says, oh, these people are bugging me in the audience. They want me to talk about the CNP, but it's so meaningless. And oh, there's this conspiracy theory out there that the CNP runs everything and the CNP runs the world. And I'm not saying the CNP runs the world. The CNP runs everything. But CNP is kind of an example for a creepy network, same kind of creepy networks we see on the left. And my God, they want to control politics and media, and we have to be very, very cautious about that. And of course, if there's a CNP meeting, if somebody gets into the CNP, of course there are other connections, family connections, like we saw with Eric Prince from Blackwater, or certain other intelligence relevant connections there. So it's not like I'm coming up with a super CNP master conspiracy theory. I'm just looking into these matters. So, of course, they're working with emotions. They're using the anger and the fear a lot. And anger and fear are necessary emotions sometimes, and they have their place. But do not think that you can win a civil war against the left and the Muslims and the political center, and you can just win with your anger, right? You're not going to just win with your anger. This is not going to happen. This is never going to happen. And so right now, before the midterm elections and during all this social media censorship, people are now very afraid of false flags, of secret intelligence operations, terrorist attacks blamed on the right wing. So for example, we have this hysterical warning on InfoWars today, on August 15th, 2018. Emergency alert, media false flag imminent. So yeah, this big fear that somebody stages something and blames the right. But this is not the only danger, right? There is a danger that unstable people from the right actually will do something stupid. You know, narcissists on pills, they will do something very stupid. And we have to react to that the right way. You know, we have to preempt this the right way. So we have to make clear, of course, you have crazy people everywhere, can be a leftist, can also be a right-winger. And this might happen, of course. Somebody snaps and somebody does something stupid. And you can't just explain that stuff away by concocting conspiracy theories or to present slight bits of interesting information. You can present that as ironclad proof. So like at the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, some guy runs people over in a car and you have some guy filming it, and this guy, he used to work for the Foreign Service, probably used to be one of millions of Americans who once held a security clearance, and yeah, he worked for a Democrat once, but none of this was any solid evidence that this guy was part of an operation, and then this was staged, and so on and so forth. You have to be professional. You can't just explain everything away with a weak conspiracy theory. It's only going to make matters worse. And there's another threat. The combination of a stage-managed intelligence operation and a real genuine terrorist attack. And the way this works is what we saw in Norway a couple of years ago. Remember this creature Anders Behring Breivik, the Norwegian guy who detonated a huge bomb and then went to an island of left-wing youths and shot these kids and then surrendered. And this was a guy who was apparently radicalized, and there was some weird connections there. This is a guy who was radicalized, and he, like most terrorists, he believed that a terrorist attack is the only thing that worked. It's the only thing that gets people moving, and the only thing that can force a confrontation. Right? So you have some right-wingers, some pissed-off right-wingers in the United States right now, and they're in contact with informants and agents from the intelligence agencies. And these agents they're telling the right-wingers, you need to bomb something, you need to kill people, you need to create this this chaos, because then the left will retaliate and the left will show its true colors, and then the Muslims will show their true colors. And then we will get our civil war, and we, the right wing, will win the civil war. We can't win the political way. We can't outdo all the other groups. We can't just force our will on, impose our will on them. And if we play it slowly, and if we try to play it politically, we're going to lose over time. Because there's going to be more and more left-wing youths, and there's going to be more Muslims, and we're just going to lose. So the only thing that works now, according to this kind of brainwashing, or this agitation, the only thing that supposedly works is if you create this rage and chaos. And you can use this trick on apparently anybody. You can use that trick on radical Muslims, radical leftists, and radical right-wingers. And in that case, you would have, or you could have, tomorrow, next week, in 3 years, in 5 years, you could have a somewhat genuine terror attack from the right that was supported by intelligence agencies, or somehow encouraged by intelligence agencies. And so this would be a very bad scenario, and we have to prepare for a scenario like this. All right, we can't just people can't just do the same thing they've been doing all over the place, namely Something blows up, people get shot, immediately crappy conspiracy theories are concocted, and oh, it was all actors, and it's just none of that is real, and you know, this photo is the same guy as that photo, even though they're just the same kind of age, gender, and hair color, and that sort of nonsense. You know, we can't just come up with a silly conspiracy theory, right? Because I said this about Sandy Hook. I said this about Sandy Hook. You could have a 3-man team, a 3-man Black Ops team, and they have access to medical and criminal databases and gun owner databases, and they have a variety of chemicals, and they find some unstable people, and they break in when they're not home, and they poison these people subtly with chemicals and destabilize them so they will go crazy and kill people. It's simple, it's cheap, only needs three people involved in an operation like this, hypothetically. Of course, you can expand this, you can expand an operation like this, so you could poison someone, but you could also propagandize someone. Yeah, right? You could just give people, that unstable people, that line of, well, we have to have an attack, otherwise nothing's going to change, nothing's going to move. So be very cautious of these things, and together, reasonable people from the left, the center, the right, reasonable people together, they form their own intelligence circles, they form their own organic community, and they can prevent this sort of stuff, or they can react the right way to things like that. Be that a right-wing terrorist incident, or a Muslim terrorist incident, or a left-wing terrorist incident. And what's going to happen? What is the right-wing or the alt-right going to do if there is a left-wing terror attack? Will they examine that case properly? Will they look for suspicious stuff? Will they try to trace it back to maybe right-wing establishment circles? I'm afraid not. I'm afraid if there's a weird attack, there's a weird event, I think InfoWars and others from the alt-right, they're going to go along with a story that fits the current line, the current pro-Trump line, or whatever. Same. That, I think, is going to happen. So if you confront someone, or if you comment on something, if you talk to people about these things, just try to be professional about it. Try to understand how hard it is to prove something, but it's always your task to estimate what you can trust, whom you can trust, what ideas you can trust, what's a good idea, what's a bad line of reasoning. Be very careful out there. So, if you like this video, please comment down below, please share this, and support us on Patreon.